children are in school, grades K through 12, at this very moment. Very soon, school will be dismissed, and the wonderful world of distractions will engulf our children right now after school. And one of those great distractions to any student at this very hour will be a higher power. And by higher power, I speak not of a religious institution, not of a god, but the high power of the world of drugs, drug dealers, and how they capture our children's attentions and curiosities as they lure them in with their impressionability. After researching this subject, I've come to believe that we absolutely have to fight a more efficient war on drugs in our schools and among our youth. This is not a time to give up. This is not a time to decriminalize. This is a time for stricter laws. I realize that we have tried and tried different drug laws in the past, and we have seen the failure of how they have worked out to negativity. But now is not the time to be lenient. Now is the time to fight more aggressively in our war again for the minds and the health of our young people. Firstly, drugs are being exchanged among youth at an alarming rate, especially in school. This is just one of a few problems. Statistics have shown that drugs in schools are on the increase, especially among younger grades. According to Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, from 2002 to 2010, illegal drug use among adolescents ages 12 to 17 have increased from 9.3 to 10%. An example of this is we see the illicit drugs in 2002 rise from 8.3 to 8.9% just last year alone. And we can see also the increase in use of other drugs that have damaged the health and minds and subsequently altered the education of our young students. Also, teen arrestees often test positive for drug use. For example, the National Institute of Justice's and Arrestee and Drug Monitoring Systems, ATOM, drug testing program found 66% of male arrestees tested positive for marijuana. Also, evidence shows that the drug problems in schools are catching students at a very young age. According to drugrecognition.com, 21.8 million Americans aged 12 or older used illegal drugs just last month. The same study says that 8% of the population aged 12 and older used illicit drugs like marijuana, cocaine, that includes crack, heroin, hallucinogens, inhalants, or other prescription-type drugs. As we now see the most crucial part of our problem, let's find out what is causing these problems. Number one, the war on drugs, as I alluded to before, has become lapsed in our society, especially in our schools. By the war on drugs, I mean a campaign of prohibition launched by the United States government, undertaken by the United States government to explain the illegal drug trade to children and other adults, and explain its harmful effects on their systems and on their minds. According to the conversation of Just Say No pep talks started by Nancy Reagan in the 1980s have long faded in the minds of our children. At one point they were, they now have diminished. This is proven by Jeffrey Elliott's article, Just Say Nonsense, in Washington Monthly magazine, which says in the past 10 years, drug schooling has developed into a $2 billion business, $1.2 billion of which could be used simply for guidance counselors, for drug pamphlet production, and for colleges cross-country. Further proof of this is that USA Today now says that a survey taken among students, which says from 2002 to 2007, the percentage who say they attended schools where drugs were peddled has increased from 12% to 31% in middle school. It has increased among high schoolers from 44 to 61%. As if this weren't enough, peer pressure is also a problem. Peer encouragements have been found to be the strongest pushers of drug use during adolescence. It has been argued that peers induce other peers into doing drugs, and that they become more tolerant of drug use when they're in certain company. The Adolescent Substance Abuse Knowledge Base reports that around 30% of teens are offered drugs in middle school and high school. And Cervellum Public Data Bank says that approximately 66% of drug users are peer pressured into trying drugs while in public school. And this leads to my third point. Drug transactions are taking place on these school grounds because there is a lapse of security. The nation's public schools, first, received a poor grade when it came to protecting teens from drug and gang activity. A nationwide survey suggests, according to Pride Survey's national summary for grades 6 through 12, 36% of seniors have tried or used illicit drugs before graduation days. In 2010, WebMD reports 32% of 12 and 13-year-old children in middle school said that drugs were used, kept, or sold on school grounds. This is most summarized by my colleague, Erica Wilczek, who was a student at Horace Mann High School in Riverdale, New York. It's a particularly upscale high school. Nobody would have thought that drugs were being mass-produced there. But they did. But she testified that drugs are an easy thing to get in my school, Jordan. And when I asked how privileged schools have such a problem under the wire, they say, she said to me, security. Nobody expects privileged rich kids to acquire these under the table. Too privileged, too stuffy. But the problem is, it's a public and private school problem, Jordan, and no one regulates it here on the private level. So now we have a challenge. But what will we do to face these difficulties head on? Well, firstly, I proposed that we must drug test students on enrollment to high school. It seems extreme, but look how people have attitudes toward drug testing. High school athletes are already cautious of drug testing. Like my friend Erica, who was a soccer athlete, who says that on the dependencies of scholarships and other accolades, she and her fellow colleagues were cautioned themselves to shy away from the drug trade that was transpiring on school grounds. They didn't want to lose what they already had, and this is the impression that we need to give. You don't need to lose what you have and what you can throw away so easily. Drugs such as marijuana stay in the system for 3 months, and during the summer period of 2 months, there's a big gap for distraction. One of those distractions can be drugs. Saving yourself from that, you think of the consequences of your enrollment to high school. Do you really want to jeopardize your education for a simple, pleasurable 2-month period? My second solution, randomly drug test students throughout the year. And this has already been passed. The Board of Education in New Jersey passed a plan to randomly test grades 6 through 8 students to see if they are under the influence of drugs. As testified by New Jersey Elementary School Principal Sandra Spasic, said education as a deterrent. In an interview with CBS News, she also said, "They're hoping that the students say if they're at a party that they don't want to drink or do drugs because there could be drug testing the next day." Third and lastly, for my solutions, we should start drug testing students applying for student loans and financial aid. Government spending is already being done for financial aid and student loans, and many college students are throwing it away, throwing their time away, skipping classes, spending taxpayer money, doing drugs. According to political consultant Dick Morris, the war on drugs is not being won because we have not begun to fight it. And he corroborates that we should also test every student receiving a student loan. As paying for drug addicts is a waste of federal tax dollars for a destructive lifestyle habit, those who are not discouraged from drug use will be barred from receiving society's benefits. Now, many of you may consider introducing all of these plans a bit too harsh. I also noticed that many of you are going to go into law enforcement. Let me already inform you that agencies like the NYPD and the FBI are among the few public workplaces that do drug